Hello everyone, welcome back to alkaline hydroxide 784, and today in the TDBTP we will be doing history paper 2. I mean, not really doing it, but yeah, never mind. Uh, so yeah, after the paper 1 finished, I'm pretty sure some of you might be feeling good, some of you may not be feeling good. I don't know. I mean, this is a statement that will make sense no matter what year it is, so never mind. So, if you're feeling good, then good job, I guess. I mean, good job as in you've done your best. I think that's what I would like to interpret, and hopefully you can continue that positive energy into the next paper. If you're not feeling good and you feel like you messed up big time, then don't think too much about it, because anyway this is a completely different set of content. Although the format is the same, it's a completely different set of content, and you need to look at that completely different set of content right now. And let's just be happy that they give you like 4 days of time in between the two papers, so that you don't. There's always some weird noise going on outside, so just ignore that. But let's say, so you have enough time to hopefully recalibrate your mind towards the next set of content, which for paper 2 will be the Southeast Asian history. As I mentioned in the previous TDBTP, I do find history paper 1 a lot easier than history paper 2, because of the content is, and also because of the arguments that I have heard about them. It's like I'm more familiar with arguments as well. It's not just the content. I learned some of the information or the arguments. I mean, like, not the full argument, but like a fundamental version of it beforehand in secondary school. But for paper 2, this is completely new content. I have a lot more things to memorize now, especially if you're talking about Asian financial crisis. You have to remember all of the statistics if you're gonna quote them down in your paper. Otherwise, you might be making a bit of a baseless claim in a sense. I don't know. And if you memorize it wrongly, then I don't know how it's gonna work. So yeah. So yeah, for paper 2, you also have 3 teams. The first SPQ team will be the how do I say, ASEAN, right? Okay, actually the SPQ team is ASEAN, but it's not the first team, it's the third team. So the two essay teams will be the economic part of it, and also the political part of it, in the sense. Yeah. As you can see, I don't remember the exact name of the teams. How fun. Anyways, so when you're looking at the political system, like how, like, the government, whether there's any communism or whether it was completely democratic, or how truly democratic it was versus something that's more of a military government, and things like that. That's the very basic way of thinking about it. But there's a lot of factors that go into the whole political history of Southeast Asia. So yeah. And in the process of it, you have to go around memorizing the names of all of the people who are involved in it, and all kinds of organizations and things that happen to be involved in the political history. And that's what makes this a lot more confusing, because unlike the Cold War scenario, which is quite connected, everything is really just connected into one cohesive thing, and you could literally represent like a few countries in like a group. Let's say, for example, the Warsaw Pact or the NATO, in a sense, like you can say everything under the NATO or something like that. Here we are looking at individual countries. Even though there are similarities between the countries, there's also a lot of differences, which means you have to know which stuff is actually similar and which stuff is different, and it's a lot more complicated than Cold War. Yeah, that's why I find paper 2 a bit harder than paper 1. It's because the the region of Southeast Asia is quite unique. We have a lot of interesting histories, in the sense. We have a lot of common history as well as a lot of individual histories motivated by the individual countries, like, their own way of thinking, the government's choices, in a sense. and yeah, you had to really look at that into detail. So my way of studying for paper 2 was to really look at the arguments rather than the individual countries themselves, because looking at them as individual countries just makes you more confused. And in Cold War, the thing that makes it easy to learn is the connection, or like international history is a bit more connected in a sense. Although you could argue that all of the Asian countries and maybe the third world countries are a bit left out in the sense. I think that's precisely why it was a bit connected, because they're only focusing on this very small region of Europe most of the time. Sorry, and America, of course. But anyways, in Southeast Asian history, the best way to learn it would be to look at the arguments rather than the countries themselves. Because if you look at the arguments at this point of time, like since you already would have learned about each of the individual countries, their own history, their everything, comparing the countries is what makes your essay go well. So you need to look at the comparisons between countries, as well as the arguments that you can make about each, about the kinds of arguments that you can make, like which countries are democratic, what factors contributed to them being democratic versus countries that ended up in a military government or something like that, like autocratic government in a sense. And you have to see which factors led to each of it, for example. And you might want to do the same thing for the economic aspect as well, which is the theme 2, the Asian financial crisis bit. And I think there's a little bit more cohesion in it, but the problem here is now the statistics. The statistics is what makes everything annoying, because you have to go and memorize the statistics now. Like in economic stuff, you had to state down numbers. Even if it's history paper, you need to state down the numbers. So yeah, if you still haven't memorized any numbers, maybe like if you have trouble memorizing very specific numbers, maybe if it's like 55 or something, 55%, then just say it's somewhere above 50%. At least it's better than not saying anything. That's one way of going over the hurdle of memorizing weird statistics. And sometimes you tend to mess them up, like you jumble up. Maybe one country is 18 and then the other country is 81, then you jumble the two of them and you write it the wrong way around. I guess you could kind of overcome that by seeing the actual context of what you're writing. If you know this country is supposed to have a low statistic, then you give it a lower statistic. But usually the jumbling happens with very similar numbers, like maybe 60 and 70 or something. That's a little bit too similar in a sense. Like too close in the sense. uh yeah, but I don't really know how much they really look into the statistics, so I don't over worry about it either. Just try your best. Yeah, and then use the strategy that I told about, saying stuff like over 50 or around 50%, for example. If you really cannot get the exact number in your head. Anyways, but you must know at least some kind of statistics if you're talking about the economic part of it. Uh yeah, then for those two, it's really based on arguments for the essay questions. For the SBQ question, which is about ASEAN, I think in Cold War you would have intuitive arguments about the things, but in ASEAN I tend to not have that such an intuitive argument at the beginning. So it takes a while to get to understand the arguments that take place in ASEAN related stuff. So in order to do that, you had to look at the various events, see which events were the most significant, because um like in Cold War the events are very obvious, like you know which event does what. But in ASEAN, some of the events aren't so obvious. Like you had to really look at the individual countries' actions, and you have to see which, like for example, if you're looking at Indonesia, what did it do before saying that, oh look, Malaysia isn't supposed to be an independent country, we want you, that kind of thing, before it did its whole, what was the thing called, the operation, uh what was it called, okay, anyway, before it did that thing where it decided to bomb the McDonald's house, that you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, before it did that, what was the why was it quiet before a certain period of time? Like, if you know what happened before that, it was about the whole issue with the Dutch. Like, they finally got independence from the Dutch, and they're trying to make sure that the Dutch doesn't get any more stuff from them, any more land from them. So that issue occupied their minds, and once that was over, they can now turn over to see that Malaysia is independent, and that makes them very unhappy for some reason. Yeah, for a very interesting reason. um yeah, you can, like, that kind of stuff is what you're supposed to look at, that kind of context within each of the countries' decisions. Because in the Cold War, it's like very obvious, it's like very high stakes high stakes seeming kind of events. Whereas here is more of individual countries, what context they face, and how the context influences their decision towards other countries and what they decide to do. Yeah, so that's how you study for ASEAN. You look at which events, it may not seem so significant at first, but certain events are actually pretty significant in determining that, whether Indonesia decides to attack Malaysia or not at that point of time. Or other events, like, for example, the formation of ASEAN is also kind of influenced by many things, like the exit of, countries from the region and things like that. And also stuff on the South China Seas. You do know that there's a possible source-based topic, and that seems like a really hard topic to get content for because you don't really learn that much about it. But it's if you can still come up with arguments for it, it's still possible. It's just that you end up having a bit of a harder time. So if you do feel like you're a bit inadequate with some of the content, you can try reading up a bit on it or looking at recent news, because South China Sea is quite has a long history. It even extends into today. So you might as well read up a bit about it. Look at the news about it. Either not really now, but maybe last year, last year, last 10 years maybe. Okay, maybe not the last 10 years. You don't have enough time to read that much news, do you? But anyway, you get the idea. So yeah, if you feel like that might come out, then read up on it. If you think it's not gonna come out, then trust yourself, I guess. But at the same time, as with paper one, I suggest don't spot topics, because spotting topics may not really work. Cambridge has a very weird mind, and we cannot predict it that much. So don't or even if you choose to spot a topic, please do read everything. It's just that the topic that you spot will have a bigger part of your study, I guess. Like, you study that a little bit more than the other topics, instead of only studying that one topic. You should still at least read at a basic level all of the other topics, so that you don't go in completely unaware of what you're gonna do when you see a topic that you didn't really study for, in a sense. Yeah. So yeah, I hope this is useful information. And if you want more information, maybe you can listen to a paper one video if you haven't looked at it yet. But for paper two, really, there's a bit of a difference, because the way I approach it is also different compared to paper one. Honestly, it's entirely because of my familiarity with paper one, and as well as the different kind of content that you get in paper one and paper two, the different kind of connectivity that you get. So yeah, I hope you appreciate history after all of this. I know doing the papers is a bit of a pain, but at the end of the day, you do get to appreciate many things that you learn from reading history, and I think that's what matters the most. So yeah, good luck for your paper. After that, you can be like, yay, you're done with this. Just think about that joy you get out of finishing the paper. So yeah, as for the time strategy, I think you should just you can look at the one in paper one. It's the same thing. Just follow the time, the 1 hour 10 minutes for SBQ, and then 50 minutes for each of the essays. Yeah, that's up to you to decide. So yeah, with that, I would like to say good luck to history paper, as well as your MCQ papers if you have any. And with that, I would like to say thank you and bye.